Hello, everybody. My name is Brad Walsh. I am the host, founder, and producer of the Empowerography podcast, a platform that was created to help elevate and amplify the voices of women through sharing their stories. I've recorded over 650 episodes, and Empowerography is rated in the top 2% globally. I welcome to episode 9 of Beyond the Mic, where I share tips, tricks, and thoughts on how to improve your game as a podcast host, also on the other side of the mic as a podcast guest. But today we are focusing on podcast hosting. And I'm going to talk about mastering the art of the interview. Now, this one's a tough one. For me personally, when I first started Empowerography, I had never, ever, ever interviewed anyone in my life. I had no clue what I was doing. I had the AV background, the audiovisual background. I knew all about sound production, video production, all of that stuff. I knew all of those things, and editing and so forth, but I had no idea when it came to interviewing. And so this is just proof that practice makes perfect. You can do this. Now, there are many facets to mastering the art of the interview. And for me, I would have to say that one of the most important, if not the most important aspect of mastering the art of interviewing is the power of active listening, actually listening to what your guests are sharing with you. It is an absolute game changer. It's not just about hearing what your guest says, it's about truly absorbing the words, their tone, the meaning, everything behind what they're sharing with you. It's about holding space for your guest. When you actively listen, you are fully 100% present. And that presence is what creates the magic. I can remember I got some feedback from a guest once, and she had been listening to her episode. This was after it released. She had been listening to her episode in the car with her daughter. And her daughter said to her after they finished listening, she said, "Wow, he really listened to what you were saying. He went back and referred to an earlier point in the interview where you had said such and such. I can't remember what I had said or what she had said, but I had referred back to that point where she had spoken something specific early on in the interview." And her daughter caught that and said, "Wow, he really pays attention and listens." So that's what active listening is being able to put yourself into that space and hear everything they're saying. And if need be, bring that point up from earlier on in the conversation when your guest was speaking. You can't do that if you're not fully there, fully present, fully paying attention and listening to your guest. Active listening also opens the door for more deeper and organic conversations between your guest and you. When you pick up on a subtle detail or an emotional undertone and follow up with a thoughtful question in regards to what they just shared, it can lead to moments of vulnerability. And that's another piece. I can tell you that I've had women tell me that they have shared things with me that they've never shared with anyone else. And that is powerful. That being able to hold space for your guests and actually fully be present and listen to them when they're speaking, it is an absolute game changer for sure. So please, that power, the power of active listening can completely transform an interview. And also, I want to share something. Don't be afraid of the pause. There's a lot of power in the pause. Sometimes the most profound insights come when you just let the silence linger for a moment. It's okay to have silence. It gives your guest space to reflect and share something even more meaningful when there's a pause there. Now, another piece, and this is something that I also do in my interviews, is preparing thought provoking questions that encourage deep and authentic conversation. Look at your bio of your guests. I always have my guests send me their bio ahead of time, and I can look through and read through their bio and see a bit of their journey. I ask that they send me a lengthy version of their bio so that I can comb through their story and their journey. It's not just a rhyming off of what they do, what degrees they have, and all of that. It's about getting into the depths of their story. And then, as a host, reading through that and pulling out the nuggets that would create questions to make them think. That is one of the biggest things, is creating questions that make your guests think. I mean, you want your guests to walk away feeling seen and heard. That is the second most important thing, is having your guests walk away from that experience with you, that interview with you, saying, wow, that was an incredibly thoughtful interview. He really, or she really made me think when asking those questions, or that conversation was powerful. I want to recommend Brad or whoever the host is to some of my friends for his show. That's what you want. You want your guests to walk away thinking, that was an amazing experience. I would recommend him for my friends to be guests on his show. It is so powerful. That to me is one of the most important pieces as well, is having your guest feel seen and heard, and thought-provoking questions. The key is to go beyond the obvious. Frame your questions in a way that kind of invites in storytelling and introspection and thought. When your guest feels safe to open up, that is where the gold is. That is where you will pull those golden nuggets out of. And that's what makes for an incredibly thought-provoking, interesting, inspiring interview for your listeners, for your listening audience. That's what it's about. You are there to shine a light on your guests. The interview is not about you. It's got nothing to do with you. You are just there to facilitate the conversation, to ask the questions, to pull the story out of your guests, and to have them share their vulnerability and to share their experiences, which then, of course, when they get vulnerable, that creates relatability for your audience, which then in turn creates an incredibly powerful interview. So these things are so important to mastering the art of the interview. It is absolutely paramount that these things are part of it. You want to make them feel valued. You want to, like I said, you want to make them feel heard, but it's not just about feeling important or valued during the interview. You want to make them feel comfortable. I've had guests on the show, women who are incredibly nervous before their interview. And I always tell them, and this seems to work very well, I always tell my guests, think of it as we are just two friends sitting on the couch or sitting on the front steps or sitting down together to have a coffee or share a drink. And we're chatting about you, your story. It is so important that you make your guests feel comfortable, because not every one of your guests has done interviews before. You're going to come across people who haven't done interviews, or who aren't very seasoned in being a guest and being interviewed. So, of course, you want to make them feel comfortable, because when you make them feel comfortable, then they can open up and share, which again will result in a powerful interview. So I also always do a pre-interview. First of all, to make sure that we align, that our values align, that our missions align, that that person would be a good guest for the show, to get an idea of what their story is all about, to connect with them, to let them see who I am, and to let them connect with me and make sure that they connect with me. This is setting the stage. All of these things are setting the stage for a collaborative, stress-free experience for your guest. The last thing you want is someone to be uncomfortable during the interview, because then they won't open up, which will then, of course, not create a very powerful or inspirational interview. So it's all about setting the tone. I always hop on before the interview, have a little chat, ask them how they're doing, how they're feeling, all of that stuff. Get a gauge for how they're doing that day, and just create that relaxed environment. That is so important. And again, it goes back to it's just two friends talking. That has worked wonders for me. And then, of course, after the interview, send a follow up. I always send out an email saying, thank you for being a guest. It was a great experience. I appreciate you. These are the next steps. I'm going to keep you posted as to when your episode is going to be released. I will send you assets that you can use to promote the interview. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you. I tell them at the end of the call, I tell them that, and I also send a follow-up email thanking them for their time because their time is just as valuable as mine. So I want to let them know that I appreciate them, that I appreciate that they took the time to spend that hour with me and share their story. For me, I always talk about and use this analogy when I'm interviewing a guest, when I'm interviewing a woman for my show. I look at it like I am sitting in the passenger seat of their car and they're taking me along for the ride in the journey of their story, in the journey of their life. What an honor that is for me to be able to sit in the passenger seat while they tell their story, while they take me on that journey through their life. I am right there, front and center, front row in their story. That is powerful. That is inspirational. That is phenomenal. That is such an honor for me. Absolutely beautiful. I love that I get to do this. I love interviewing people. I love being in that space to hear people's stories, to share in those stories, to be part of it, to be invited into that space where they share some of the most vulnerable things that they've been through in their lives. What an honor that is. I absolutely love that I get to sit in this space and interview and be part of someone else's story. We all have a story, and to be able to help facilitate, have a platform, and to help facilitate getting their story out there into the world is such an incredible honor and pleasure. I absolutely love it. And so I want to leave you with one final thought about interviewing. I could go on forever about this. It is such a powerful thing to be able to do, but mastering the art of the interview is about more than just asking good questions. It's about creating a safe space where stories can come alive, where stories can come to fruition, where your guests feel seen and heard, and where your audience walks away inspired and incredibly deeply connected with you and the guest. When you approach every single interview with curiosity, care, compassion, and a commitment to actively listening to your guest and creating that space where they feel seen and heard, you are not just hosting a podcast, you are amplifying voices and changing lives. I hope you've all enjoyed this episode. I hope it hits and resonates for someone out there. I will see you on Thursday for the next episode of Beyond the Mic, episode 10, where I am going to talk about turning listeners into a community, creating a community based around your podcast. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on Thursday for the next episode. Thanks very much.